welcome to Frame for Light. I'm Dave Kelly. This program is designed to encourage viewers to develop a greater sense of appreciation for both the art and the science of photography. In today's program, we're going to talk about travel photography. It's a subject that most of us find to be the most enjoyable part of photography. We look forward to our travels, we look forward to the photographic aspect of traveling, and we want to look forward to the photos when we come back and remember those journeys. Well, we'll put together all of the details and all the tips that we've talked about in the previous episodes in today's show. But before we get started on our main topic, I'd like to do a brief recap of what we talked about in the previous episode, which was episode number 5. So in episode number 5, we talked about photographing active people. And the first thing that we discussed was the fact that humans will always dominate viewer interest in our photography. And we used this example of the steam train. Now you notice that the steam train is the dominant image in that photograph, but as soon as we realize that there are people in that photo, our eyes will drift automatically over to the left side of the frame and see those people. And we especially look at that little boy dressed in red who has his hands on his knees. So once the eyes move over to the people, that's generally where the eyes will stay. And we also talked about when we photograph people, we want to aim for authentic expression. With our human subjects, we want everything to look natural and authentic. We don't want the fake smiles. So we use this example of a gentleman who looks like he is relaxed in his pose. He's leaning against the cab with his right arm. His feet are crossed below, as you can see. And the smile that's generated from that does seem to be authentic because of that body language that looks like he's very much at home in that environment. And we also talked about the importance of focusing on the eyes when we photograph human subjects, because our eyes will always go to the eyes of the people in the photograph. So the eyes have to be in crisp focus. Also, we talked about how the eye line should rest about 1/3 of the way down from the top of the frame. As you can see with me in this particular framing, my eye line is about 1/3 of the way from the top. And that is because we want to have enough headroom so that we don't cut off the top of the head, but we don't want too much headroom, so we need to leave about 2/3 of the frame below the eye line so we can reveal the information below the eyes. And we use this example of this woman whose eye line is about 1/3 of the way down from the top, and her eyes are in very crisp focus. And we can see that with the other information in the frame, this is the appropriate framing. Now, we also talked about when we travel, we come across characters who are often in costume. And even though those characters are in costume, we want to make sure that the expression that they are generating in the photograph seems authentic for that role. I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. And we also talked about the fact that subjects do not always have to be looking at the camera. In fact, sometimes our better photographs have subjects that are not looking at camera, especially if they're active people involved in activities. Now here's the example of this gentleman who is playing a role. He's dressed as a clown. You can see that he's not actually looking at the camera, and his head is tilted to his right. He's playing the accordion and he's singing, and so as a result of his body posture and the fact that he's not looking at the camera, this looks like an authentic expression, even though he is a character playing a role. Now here is an example of people. They're not in costume and they're not playing a role. They're just going about their daily lives, shopping in a vegetable market. But as you'll notice, no one is looking at the camera. We have the shoppers looking at the vegetables and the fruits, and we have the shop vendor on the right-hand side tending to the display. So if they're not looking at the camera, it's actually a nice slice of life. We also talked about following the action when we work with people or when we're photographing people, and people are moving targets. So we don't always know what's going to happen next, but we can anticipate that there's going to be a quote-unquote moment that's going to be interesting. So we have to follow and just kind of anticipate, but be ready when that moment happens. We also have to be able to find the level of where the action is occurring. And this is especially important if we're photographing children or pets who have a much lower perspective down low compared to where we are. In my case, I'm over 6 feet tall, so I don't want to photograph everything from the perspective of someone who's over 6 feet tall, because we'll lose out on a lot of the important perspective that would result if you get down to the level of the action. And we use this example here of this boy who's going to interact with this deer at the fence. Now, if you'll notice, the angle of the camera is actually even lower than the eye line of the child. It's really at the eye line of the deer. So, but I had to wait for the moment. I figured something was going to happen, and sure enough, the little boy is feeding the deer. So you wait for that moment, you're at the right level for the action, and you are rewarded for your patience. Now here's another example of getting down to the level of where the action is. We used this example last week of the St. Mark's Square in Venice, Italy. And you see that people are feeding the pigeons, and you have to get down low to the level of where they are in order to capture that shot and represent it in the best way possible. So that concludes our recap. So let's go on into the main topic, which is travel photography for today. Now when we talk about travel photography, I've heard people complain in the past that they anticipated the travel, they went, they took the photographs, they were excited about what they were doing, but when they brought the photographs back and looked at them, they were disappointed. It seems that the photographs didn't represent what they actually saw, and they certainly didn't represent how they felt about the travel, so somehow they missed it. They didn't capture it the way that they had hoped. And so I encourage people to think about coverage and context, and think about capturing the essential visual references of whatever it is you're traveling to see. And what I mean by this is you need to plan your travel in advance. You need to take a look at photos of the area where you're going to travel. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to duplicate exactly what other photographers have done, but it really helps to have a visual reference of what it is you're going to be seeing and what you probably will be photographing. For example, if you're going to Paris and you take photographs of everything except the Eiffel Tower, except the Notre Dame Cathedral, except the Palace of Versailles, except any number of other things that are famous about Paris, like the Arc of Triomphe, and you bring back your photos, of course people are going to be disappointed because they're going to say, well, where's the Eiffel Tower? Where's the Arch? Where's the Notre Dame Cathedral? So if you miss those key essential elements, you're going to be missing something. Again, you don't have to duplicate what others have done, but you need to come back with photos that generate a memory amongst others that have been there before and others that may want to travel there in the future. So think about being a storyteller who's providing visual coverage and telling a complete story of your travels. So you have to embrace that role of visual storyteller. As we talked about last week, a picture tells 1,000 words, or it's worth 1,000 words. And so as a visual storyteller, you want to be the person that gives us the complete story so that when we look at your photos, you don't have to explain. The visuals, the pictures should tell the story in and of themselves. Now that's easily said, but how do we actually accomplish that task? Well, the way we do that, one of the ways we do that, is to go from big to small, or vice versa, in our coverage. And what I mean by that is taking a look at the images that are available to you and the locations where you're at and determining that you're going to cover everything that you can that will tell the complete story. Now this is what we just looked at a moment ago in Venice in St. Mark's Square. Now we know that there are lots of pigeons there, and we can tell that, you know, the architecture is probably interesting, but it doesn't really show us St. Mark's Square. So I would call this the medium shot. So what we need is a wide shot or an establishing shot. That's when we go big. We go big for the establishing shot. We go to this, which is the medium shot, and then eventually we can get to the close-ups. So that's how you can tell a complete story. Now, in this case, this is the St. Mark's Basilica. This is where the pigeons are, and this is where the people are. So this would be your establishing shot or your wide shot. And as I just mentioned, the previous shot is the medium shot, and then we can go to close-ups from there. So we have to have that establishing shot. Since we're in Venice, we'll use this image as well. We used this in a previous episode when we talked about depth of field and how we have depth of field to infinity with this particular image, which probably means we're using an f-stop of f16 or something like that so that we can get that depth of field. But this is your establisher. Now that you've established what Venice is, there are no questions. Well, what does this say about Venice? It says, well, there are lots of tourists in Venice. It shows that it's apparently, there's a long walkway along the water line. And there's also some interesting architecture here. So we're halfway there. Half the battle is already done. Now we can go to other shots that move to the medium perspective and then to the close-up, and we'll have the complete story told. I'm going to show you how we do that right now. So we know that we're in Venice. We've established Venice. And we know that it's a city of canals. So here we're looking at the Grand Canal, which is where the main water traffic flows through Venice, and this shows that it's a very aquatic city. People live along the canals, and there's lots of traffic. So you can see that we have gondolas with tourists, and we also, on the right-hand side of the frame, you can see there's cargo on that boat. So there's commercial traffic that flows down the Grand Canal. Now, the Grand Canal is the biggest canal, but there are also a number of much smaller canals as well. And so we go to the next shot, which is more of the medium perspective of one of the more narrow canals that goes through a residential area. Now here you're going to see 3 gondolas. Remember we talked about the rule of 3s in the previous episode, so we have 3 gondolas in this particular shot, and they're coming toward us, and it gives us a nice medium perspective. I particularly like the gondolier in that shot because in the first boat that's closest to us, because we can see his oar sticking into the water right where the light is reflecting off of the water, and I think that's a really nice touch. So now we've done the medium shot. Now what do we do about a close-up if we want to emphasize life on the water in Venice? Well, here's our close-up. We see here that this is a funeral boat, and if we're going to depict life in Venice and death in Venice, we can see that as someone passes away, they're put into the casket, and the casket is loaded onto that funeral boat. And so that gives us a really interesting insight into what life is like in Paris, in that canal city. So let's go on to another canal city, which is Amsterdam. And you can see here that this shot was taken through the window of a canal boat looking under the bridge. And under that bridge goes to another bridge, to another bridge, to another bridge, to infinity here along the canal. So the point is that if you're in a canal city, you have to show and emphasize that there is life along the canal. And that's one of the ways that we do that, is by capturing shots from the boats, above the boats, along the canal, and so forth. Okay, now viewers generally enjoy being inspired or motivated by travel photography. That's why it's of such interest to everyone, because people want to be inspired. They want to be motivated. They would like to travel to wherever you have been if the photographs inspire them. Many people will never travel to those places, but just looking at the photographs is inspiration enough. So we want to give them what they want, which is what I was talking about earlier when I said you need to come back with some of those basic photos that everyone will expect. Okay, so here's an example of the Spanish Steps in Rome. Now you'll notice that the Spanish Steps are a very prominent aspect of Rome, very famous historically in Rome, and at the base of the steps there is this very famous street where there are a number of designer label shops where people go shopping, and you see some people in the foreground walking away from the Spanish Steps, and at the top of the Spanish Steps we see the Trinita del Monte, which is the cathedral there at the top of the Spanish Steps. So this is the kind of thing that people would see and say, oh yeah, I would like to walk down that street, or I remember walking down that street when I was in Rome a few years back. And that's the kind of image that you want to make people feel inspired or motivated to travel to Rome. Now here we are at the Colosseum, and we're looking inside the Colosseum. You'll notice that the floor of the Colosseum has eroded. It's no longer there. But under the main floor you see a series of chambers or cells, and those chambers or cells, those are the places where they house the wild animals, the lions and the tigers and the bears, that would then be brought through an elevator system up to the main floor so they could unleash the wild animals to fight with the gladiators in front of the large crowd. And so we're showing sort of the wide perspective of the Colosseum in this shot. We go to the close-up in the next shot to show the arches of the walls of the Colosseum, and you see that we've used the diagonal lines that we talked about in previous episodes to emphasize this. But I like that foreground arch. There's also the background arch, which is more intact. But the foreground arch shows masonry that's falling apart. There's been erosion, but it reveals the stonework and the masonry that went into building the Colosseum, 2,000 years ago. So I really like that as far as a close-up shot. Okay, now the main thing about travel photography is that you should move around a lot. Don't catch that terrible disease that afflicts travelers, which is worse than malaria, in my opinion. It's called zoomitis. Well, I'm actually kidding about the malaria. It's not worse than malaria, but I don't like zoomitis because it really affects the quality of your work. A lot of people will buy a brand new shiny zoom lens and take it out on a journey and decide that, well, this is great with this new zoom lens. I don't have to move around. I can shoot over here and zoom in. I can shoot over there and zoom in. I can shoot over there and zoom in, and I never have to move. Well, that's not really doing justice to the photography. And your imagery will not look as good as if you were to just move to different locations. Let me give you an example of that. We're going to stay in Rome for a moment here. There we are in Rome, and we're at the Vatican here. And you can see that we're at street level, looking out into the Vatican Square at the obelisk, and that's what it looks like from ground level. So from ground level, we want to take a different perspective in the same location and see more of the city. So I moved up to the top of the Basilica here, and there you see much more of the city of Rome. Basically the same location, just moved to a higher elevation. You can't get that with a zoom lens. So we look at the city of Rome in the background there, and we see the square, which is really, we're going to see in a moment, looks more like a circle, in the obelisk in the center part, and it's a nice view of the city. But we can do more than that. We can go even to a wider shot to establish, and there we are. So now we can see the city of Rome. We can see even the river called the Tiber River there at the top of the frame, right in the middle. And to get this perspective, I had to go to the top of the dome. And at the top of the dome, I had this wonderful view of the ancient city of Rome. Now you'll notice also at the bottom of the frame there's a series of statues, but we can't really tell how large those statues are. So we need a better point of reference. And here are the statues from the front down at ground level, and we see them at the top of St. Peter's, but we can't really tell how large they are. So we need references, and so what we'll do is use people as reference points when distance or size is unclear in our photography. And so we want to know, how big are those statues? So fortunately, we could use people in this case as references, and you see that the people down below in the lower right-hand part of the frame appear to be about 1/4 the size of those statues. So those statues are about 4 times the height of the average person. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about the fact that you need familiar architecture and skylines in your representational work. I use this example already, but if you are focused on things other than the skyline, other than the traditional famous architecture of a given place, it's not going to result in a very memorable experience. If you're worried about sunsets in Paris that don't involve any of those famous sites, it's just sunsets. You need the famous sites, the architecture, the skyline, and so on. And so to do this, typically you need to try to find a high vantage point that will give you the opportunity to capture those spectacular views. Now here we are in Sydney, Australia. Now this is the famous Sydney Opera House that has that classic eggshell style design on the Opera House. And we're looking at it from the waterway. And so it's a nice view of the Opera House from the water, but I wanted to get a higher vantage point view of the skyline of Sydney. So I went across the water over to this area, and there you can see the skyline from across the way. Now if you look on the right-hand side of the frame, just to the left of those palm trees on the right-hand side of the frame, you can see the Sydney Opera House there. It's small, but you can still see it. But we can see the rest of the skyline as well. And in this shot, I wanted to use foreground-background combination, as we've talked about in previous episodes. And so we have this nice foreground that we can look at as well, which is part of a park across that waterway from Sydney. Now, if you truly want a high vantage point, you can actually go to the Tower of Sydney. So if you go over to the left-hand side of the skyline, you see that long, very thin pole with an object on the top of it. Well, that's the Sydney Tower. And you can take a number of great shots from a high vantage point in Sydney from that tower. Almost any city you go to, you can find a tower or a place where you can take those high vantage point photos. We've already talked about the Eiffel Tower. You can go to the top of the Eiffel Tower and take photos. If you're in New York City, you can go to the Empire State Building. Here in Sydney, as I mentioned, you can go to the Sydney Tower. Tokyo has a tower. And if you're in Hong Kong, you can go to the top of Victoria Peak and look down at Hong Kong from the peak. So try to include in your travel schedule some place that has a high vantage point so you can get a nice view of that area. Okay, now since we're in Sydney, I took this shot of the skyline as well, and this was taking advantage of a stormy, cloudy sky, which looked great. And you can see the skyline of Sydney over on the upper left-hand part of the photo on the horizon there. And also in the middle of the shot on the horizon, there's the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which also looks very nice. It seems to be in sort of a silhouette here. And then you can also see below that there's a lot of development being shown in Sydney, and there's even some construction underway. So again, this is a way of showing foreground and background information and using the photograph divided into thirds. The top third includes the sky and the skyline. The middle part includes the ocean, and the bottom third includes all of that new development. So we are dividing our frame into thirds, as we've talked about in previous episodes. Okay, now, when we're traveling, we want to also look for and capture unusual activities that are special or unique to that particular area. And so this means that we have to keep our eyes open. We have to look for things that would be extremely unusual to see here or in our daily lives. And that really makes the travel photography stand out. Now, for example, we're going to stay down under. We're going to go from Australia to New Zealand for the next photo here. Now, I happen to be traveling in New Zealand at Christmas time. And you say, well, Christmas time, why is it so green? Where's the snow? Well, remember, in New Zealand, Christmas time happens during their summer. The Southern Hemisphere has summer at Christmas time, and they have winter when we're having our summer. So this fellow is on a horse cart in New Zealand at Christmas time. And I followed him around and actually was in a rent-a-car, so I had to drive past him, turn around, come all the way back, park, get ready for him to come forward, and then I was able to get a good close-up shot of him with that cart. And so you can see it's summer in New Zealand and Santa Claus. That's not something you're likely to see here in the United States. Okay, now some people will say, I don't have the budget to travel to New Zealand or Australia, or I can't go to Europe right now, but I'd still like to do some great travel photography. How can I do that? Well, this is staying right in California. We have a number of missions which are very interesting and photographically enticing. So this is an example of a gate to one of those missions. You can see there that the plaster is falling off of that gate, and it's revealing some stonework, some masonry, sort of like what we did with Rome at the Colosseum a few images back. And so I really like this idea of looking at structures and seeing how they were put together. And here's another example of a mission photograph here in California, where you can see the plaster is falling off the side of the facade or the front of that tower that has the bells in it. And we can clearly see the stonework similar to what we saw again at the Colosseum. So I like to see the masonry, the stonework, and things that were put together a long time ago. Okay, and here's another example of a mission here in California. And you can see that we have that wooden cross in the foreground and then the main part of the mission in the background. And if you look over just to the right of the cross, you can also see that the plaster is starting to fall off of the wall there, revealing some of how that stonework or adobe work was put together. Okay, now when we're doing travel photography, we're also photographing nature. A lot of us like to travel into natural environments. So when we do that, we want to emphasize the grandeur, and we want to also emphasize the ruggedness and the unusual aspect of that natural environment. And also we want to show the beauty of that rugged environment, because sometimes there is a certain beauty in the ruggedness of natural environments. So here we are in Tucson, Arizona, and we're showing the cactus and also the rugged natural environment of the rocks and everything. And so as we go up a hillside, we see that we're focusing on the cactus over on the left-hand part of the frame. Now the cactus is also positioned against that beautiful blue sky, but we can see that we have more of a journey to go through here to get to the top of that hill. So here the hillside becomes very steep, but we're getting the close-ups on the cactus. So you can see that cactus on the left-hand side of the frame is very prickly, and it's very rugged, and yet there's a certain beauty to that, and that's what I'm talking about, capturing the natural beauty. So we've gone from the wide shot or the establishing shot in the beginning to now we're showing the close-ups, and that second shot of the cactus was sort of our medium perspective. So again, we're telling the story from the establishing shot to the medium shot and now to the close-up. Well, we want to continue our journey up this hill in Tucson, and so we see more cactus, more miles to go to get to the top of that hill, very rocky terrain, but it's showing us with that diagonal line of the hillside on the horizon, it shows that we're still moving uphill. So when we get to the top, this is what we see. We're rewarded by this beautiful waterfall that we see on the rocks, and we still see that crystal blue sky, and we see a cactus on the left-hand top part of the frame, which is sort of a bookend with the other cactus on the right-hand top portion of the frame, and looking into that waterfall coming down the hill. Now also, don't forget about winter and deriving a lot of beauty and winter light, which can be also beautiful. We want to capture that in our travels if we're in the winter time. So we shouldn't have to give up travel photography just because it's winter. So look for what nature will give you. And here we are. We're looking at icy trees in the wintertime, which can look very beautiful. So you see there's an icy tree and a blue sky that's got some clouds in it and the snowy terrain. It just creates a sense of natural beauty. And here's a close-up of the same thing, where you see the icy trees against the blue sky. And then when we see the sunset going behind the trees, it backlights that ice on those branches. And here we see some of the red light of sunset and also the light on the right-hand side of the sun coming into the frame, which is very nice. So we see a larger shot of the same thing with the sky behind it, and we go to the red light of winter on the tree, and then with this sequence we end with the sunset and the trees in silhouette, which is a very nice expose of winter weather. Okay, but we don't always want to spend all of our time in winter, so we come back here to Southern California, which we can see this kind of view any time of the year with the palm trees on the right and the beautiful ocean. If we want to see more of the crescent coastline, we can do that with the palm tree on the left. And finally, this is our last shot. We can see colorful flowers in the foreground, desert flowers in the foreground here in Southern California. Well, we'll end on that note, and I hope you've enjoyed this series about photography called Frame for Light. If you missed some of the previous episodes, I would encourage you to go back and take a look at those. But for today, I hope that you've been inspired and motivated to go out and capture the best that you can in travel photography. Until next time, I'm Dave Kelly. I'll catch you then.